Hello, everyone, and welcome to the live Logan Spoilercast. I'm your host, Captain Logan, and introducing tonight's panel, first of all, it's X7, Eric Holden.
Hello, everybody.
And X9, Steve Maxey.
Hello. Why am I 9?
And X13, Dan Torrey.
Hey, everybody.
Is that because he's the unlucky one?
X15, it's the Curious Low.
Hey, guys.
And Jackson Rasco.
What? Come on. Oh, man.
And the creator of the Weapon X program, Jackson Rasco.
Okay, that's better.
Rasco?
How is that better? I don't think you want to be acquainted with that guy. So thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us live. If you're doing that, thanks for watching after the fact. If you are doing that tonight, we are going to talk for a full hour, possibly a little bit longer, especially with the size of the panel we have tonight. Eric, have you noticed this? We've got almost the 7. It's basically Justice League. It's like we gave up on that whole Unite the 7 thing. We didn't give up on it. Manos just is not here, but it's like that whole thing. We have the 6, and the Unite the 7 thing kind of fell apart. But anyway, so we're going to talk spoilers tonight on Logan, my most anticipated movie of the year, and it's really hard to imagine how anything, especially in the superhero category, is going to get anywhere close to this movie. We have really set the bar really high, this high, this early in the year for comic book films.
Last year had BVS.
Literally the exact opposite situation.
That's exactly right. I mean, Deadpool to some degree, but there were certainly movies, especially Apocalypse, which didn't end up working out that way, that I would have imagined I would have at least, liked more or found, more compelling than that movie. But guys, we've got a real movie here, and it's going to be a lot of fun to talk about it in depth. So what we're going to do is we're going to go round robin, as we always do on the Spoilercast, and the panelists that haven't gotten to talk about this movie yet, because Eric and I just did how we felt about the other day, are going to tell us how they felt walking out of the theater and their best and worst thing about Hugh Jackman's final Wolverine movie. Let's go ahead and start with Dan Torrey, because he is chomping at the bit to talk about this movie. He didn't think he'd be able to be on the program tonight, and sent me a message an hour before and said, can I come? Because I just got to watch it and I want to talk about it. And I was like, yes, Dan, you don't have to ask permission. I was hoping you would be able to make it. So Dan, tell us about your experience walking out of the film, and tell us what your favorite and your least favorite things about this movie were. Go ahead.
When I came out of the theater, just sort of, I guess, sitting there where the credits were rolling and then walking out, I was thinking, wow, that's probably my favorite superhero movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever, I think. I really, really liked it. I think that the film is a really dark and depressing movie for most of the time, but I did like the maturity that the themes that it deals with are handled. But I do think that it does a good job of still being a superhero movie, in that it has some discussion as to what it means to be a hero, and Logan kind of dies as one at the very end, and it's kind of like his sacrifice continues the ideology of Professor X of hopefulness, and all of that stuff continues to the next generation of mutants, and they'll hopefully carry on that legacy inspired by Logan, which I think is awesome. I really loved that about it. My best thing was probably just the story itself and the way it's handled. It's a very deliberately paced movie. A lot of people make the Western comparison. It's very obvious because there's a lot of parallels to that in the movie, like the good Wolverine wearing the white clothes, the bad Wolverine wearing the black clothes, like the black and white hat kind of thing that we did in all kinds of classic Westerns and stuff. There's obviously like clips from some classic Westerns that we see in the movie that Professor X kind of has X-23 watch, and I think he was kind of trying to teach X-23 about why Logan is the way he is and why he's so standoffish and afraid of intimacy and things like that. So I liked that about it. The fact that it takes its time and it's a real character study. That's what I really appreciated about it. The worst thing, I honestly can't really think of something I really didn't like about this movie. Nothing that bothered me enough to say like, oh, like that's a problem. Like maybe there were things that like I wasn't as engaged in other parts necessarily, but I loved this movie. I thought it was amazing.
Okay, go ahead, Rasco.
So I also really love this movie. It was just so incredibly watchable. Put that on the box. Incredibly watchable. But I think the best thing for me was that this movie truly shocked me. Like when X-24 is introduced, that scene truly just like gut punched me, and I was just not okay for the rest of the movie. Like it really shocked me. I'll also say that this movie just felt so. It felt like the director was so confident, and that's like a thing where I think I can compare it to like Mad Max Fury Road. That's a movie from like scene one, you're like, okay, this movie is so confident in itself, and I felt that way about this movie as well. And I think that my worst thing is something that's just kind of like a movie thing. That if you don't really think about it, it just you're like, okay, it's no problem. But like if you just think about it for 1 second, you're like, wait, that's kind of weird. And that's just the like pre-edited documentary on the phone that they watch, where it's like it's got like narration.
Yep, I had that too.
Yeah. It's fine. It's like it's totally just like you can completely ignore that after it happens. It's just too well produced to be like a video that someone has on their phone, but that's it.
Well, can I stop you for a second? The crazy thing about that for me, I watched it again today, and I hadn't thought of that the first time. And then halfway through that, I went, wait a minute, how did this woman make this video? And it's clearly, what we're seeing is clearly supposed to be exactly what's on the phone, because we come out of the phone and the battery runs out and it drops, and then when he starts it again, we go back into it. So it's definitely not flashback stuff. It's exactly what he's looking at. Even the production quality of the footage, it was just the fact that she could edit that on a phone, because I think they did a pretty good job of making it look like phone quality footage. I think they might have shot a lot of that with a phone.
Well, and I thought some of the footage she shot was weird because it plays.
How did no one notice where she was with that phone?
Yeah, it plays like a standard movie, like if you find this, I'm already dead kind of a thing. To make that video months in advance and was getting footage for this inevitable
She might have
video.
just been archiving footage so that she could prove these horrible things that were going on. And then now she's putting it together because she's found Logan. And it also has that movie trope thing of this is, if you were watching this, I am dead. Well, not necessarily. You could have dropped your phone somewhere and we could pick it up and watch. I'm sorry, what was that, Rascal?
I was just going to say, I think some of the footage is supposed to be like guard GoPros on like the guard suits. I think that's what some of it, not all of it, because there's
she got a hold of the footage somehow.
Yeah. So some of it I think is like on their like it's like a body cam, like police wear body cams. It's like that, but some of it is clearly her like filming it with her phone. It's just that video is too well produced. But other than that,
that dope channel, we're already into nitty gritty stuff, but that dope channel says also, how did she know that Logan would get the phone? Yeah, that's a good question. Steve, how did you feel about this movie, and what was it, and what are your best and your worst things?
Well, I don't want to be predictable, but I loved it. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I made a list a couple days ago of my favorite comic book films of all time. This is number 3 now. I think it's just a genius film. My best thing is going to sound fairly general, but it's the thing I've been saying ever since I first got out of the theater, which is, after years of X-Men movies, Fox finally made a film. It's an actual film. It's not like it's not a movie designed for mass audiences with the intention of creating certain scenes purely for certain people's enjoyments and pander to certain crowds and try and capture as wide a demographic as possible. It's not a popcorn movie like I think almost all the X-Men movies are to some degree. Not that some of them aren't good, but like all of them to a degree are designed to be mass marketed products. This is a legitimate film. The opening, when you see Logan laying on the ground, the title card Logan pops up, that is a beautiful shot. The movie as a whole just understands that every frame matters, every scene matters, every musical score beat matters. It's a legitimate film, and that excited me to no end, because I don't like the X-Men movies. I don't like X-Men. Aside from First Class, I don't think they've done anything particularly great except for Legion. And this is the first time where I sat there from beginning to end riveted. I thought it was brilliant. My worst thing, It was originally X-24, but I've kind of come around on it. We'll talk about that. My worst thing is just that when we reveal what happened to the X-Men, that Xavier had a seizure and killed them, which is a fantastic reveal, I don't like the fact that it was just a year ago. I think it should have been like 5-10 years ago. Like, there should be a substantial gap between the X-Men died and Xavier and Logan have just been decaying away in the south of the border for years. I think that's what it should have been. And it certainly feels like that. It doesn't feel like it's been just a year.
That's fair. At least the idea isn't that Professor X was responsible for the destruction of all mutant kind. Because at first I thought that's where we were going, and then it turns out that new mutants haven't been able to be born for years, and so Xavier is separate from that whole thing. But Steve, the only so I'm with you, but I think it could have been that could have been a lot worse if it was like he's responsible for the death of mutants, and that was only a year ago. But then that would be a very different movie, of course. But
yeah, I don't even really matter so much about like the extermination of mutants. Just the notion that the X-Men died, Xavier is responsible, and Logan and Xavier have a very strange and very depressing relationship. And I don't think those two men act this way with each other after only a year of that kind of tragedy.
Yeah, the argument I might make against that, though I somewhat agree with you, is it would be difficult to stash him that long. That like people are after him and trying to find him because he's as we're told classified now as a weapon of mass destruction. And
I don't know we're after him though. I mean, the Donald says he knows about Xavier. If they were after him, I feel like they would have gotten him a long time ago.
Well, it's a good
I
point.
don't think that they were after him. I just think that it's more implied that like somebody out there in the world, like maybe the U.S. government, is after them. Like he doesn't
I have a
care.
hard time imagining nobody's
like.
Yeah, they wouldn't have had to hide in the water tower in the first place if no one was trying to find Xavier
Well, the water tower thing Logan explains is just because like they need to keep him distant, so like his powers don't kill everyone on sight.
The water tower like dampens his psychic pulse or whatever.
But they are, which I love, by the way, because it's a big round room and it's anti-cerebral. But yeah, I think they are hiding him at least to some degree. It's off in kind of in the middle of nowhere. They found private property that they're using illegally. And all of that.
And whenever someone asks Logan about the professor, he says that he died a year ago, at least in the initial confrontations he has with people when they come looking for Laura. So I would assume he's hiding him and doesn't want people to know that he has him with him,
Yeah, because
that makes sense. It's again the notion that like they have a routine about getting medicine. Logan's got a very particular job. They have a particular goal about where they're going. I don't see all of that as this has just been a year. I feel like only a year would be them figuring all of this out to begin with.
Well,
that's a good point. It'd be harder.
We don't know
having the resources to do that.
We don't know like when Professor X started having his like all of his issues. Like he could have been having some sort of like whatever's going on with his brain. He's having like seizures, and they say he has like some sort of like brain deterioration disease or something like that. That could have been going on for a while before he had the seizure that killed the X-Men.
No, that's fair. But again, it's just like the relationship between Logan and Xavier and the way they're living doesn't strike me as they've only lived this way for a year.
On the other hand, like we know Caliban's only been there that long, and I mean maybe you're suggesting that they would have needed him longer too. But I don't see them surviving without somebody else there helping them.
Yeah, and again, I agree, and it's a nitpick, but like again, it's just like the aesthetic of the movie doesn't feel to me like this is a recent occurrence.
Yeah, that's fair. Lo, what were your feelings walking out of the theater and your best and worst thing?
Loved it. I've said before on our X-Men reviews that I'm like not a huge X-Men fan. Like I don't dislike it, but I just don't like care that much. Like I've seen all the movies. I don't think I've read any comics except for the current run of All New Wolverine. So I don't know a ton about the X-Men, so I definitely went into this fresh. Like I don't really know anything about Old Man Logan. I don't know if that helped or hindered me, but I loved this movie so much. I completely agree with what everybody's saying about how it's like it's like kind of on a different level than any other superhero movie that we've had. Not to say that any of those are bad, but it's just a different type of movie. This is much more serious. It's much more like introspective and like character study. And again, not that we don't see those sorts of things a little bit, but this just kind of took it to a new level. I would say my favorite thing is probably the fact that the universe felt like fleshed out. I think they did a really good job of creating this like near future, which is one of my favorite, I don't know if you can call it genres, but like kind of near future stuff, like the movie Her, where it's like just far enough in the future that there's a couple little things like with the self-driving trucks and like it's so believable.
The not too distant future,
it's,
if you will.
It's like, it's believable enough, but they also weren't just like hand feeding the audience like, here's a huge history about these trucks, and like you kind of could have blinked and missed it that those were self-driving, and it wouldn't have mattered. Like, you know, you just kept going on. That's the thing that I sort of like latched onto, and there was just little things all over the place, like the fact that some of the stuff that we've even been talking about so far about them revealing that he was the one that killed the X-Men. Like, if you aren't paying too close of attention, like you could kind of miss that because it's sort of in like a radio broadcast, and then he kind of mentions it when he's talking to X-24, and like it's never like in this like sit down conversation where he talks about his past and we see flashbacks of what happened and, you know, all this sort of thing. So it felt very realistic. Worst thing, I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like any worst thing that I would come up with would just be kind of nitpicky. Nothing jumps out at me as something that was like distracting me or taking me out of the movie. So I'm gonna not do a worst thing.
Eric and I, of course, already did ours and talked about initial thoughts with how we felt about. So we'll go ahead and move on and jump straight into some more in-depth spoiler talk. I want to start with the Old Man Logan idea and how that is played in this. Eric and I expected this, especially being set at all in the future, to be much more of a kind of post-apocalyptic kind of world and to be based more on that comic, and I'm really impressed with how satisfied I was and how gripping this movie was without giving me exactly Old Man Logan.
It almost kind of feels like they read the title, they're like, yeah, we could do a movie where Logan's old.
Things that they pull from that book, but clearly they've read it.
No, I don't mean that they haven't read it, but like that is the big thing that comes from that book, is we're telling a story about a Logan that's past his prime and his healing factor's breaking down.
It's kind of interesting that
all the X-Men are dead.
The opposite character arc, but we certainly start from the opposite place. Old Man Logan begins with Logan with a family being happy, basically happy, regardless of how ruined the world is.
And having taken a vow to never pop his claws.
And I wanted that movie, and having seen this, it's as great of a story as you could have told with that, I
Absolutely.
think.
Yeah, I really kind of liked the world that we have here, because I think it's very reflective of where Logan's character is at the beginning of the movie. Like, we see him like driving a bunch of people around when he's a limo driver, and it's just kind of like people that are shouting exclusionary things at people and making a mockery of the kind of family and intimacy kind of values that Logan is so afraid of embracing, that Xavier really holds dearly and wants to kind of as a father figure to Logan, he wants him to have that human experience before he dies, because he feels like that's the missing part of his life. And you see, like, you know, these women, like, you know, in the limo, just, you know, just being completely hedonistic and stuff. And I don't know, like, I think Logan is kind of defined by the world that he's living in and vice versa. And I really liked that about it. It was really cool. And it has some,
I thought
in
this
being a near future, it's definitely reflective of some of the things that are going on in our culture today. That really resonated with me too. I liked that about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say, Dan. I thought the near future that we had here was in some ways the most chilling thing in the movie. And I've even heard some people say, I expected it to be a scarier future, and it doesn't look like that. It doesn't look that different from the world we live in, and that's a horrifying thought to me. That that people are looking at this, and you have that. You have that radio broadcast where somebody on an opinion show on the radio says people are just walking around like zombies, that they're sleepwalking through their lives, and the government is controlling people. And it sounds real conspiratorial. And then first of all, when you look at nearly every human character in this movie, with the exception of the family that takes Logan and Xavier and Lauren in, they are that way.
They're self-absorbed and they're apathetic.
Yes, and they seem to have what it is that makes them human. And then you find out that the Weapon X program has been putting things in the water supply, and that seems to be that whole conspiratorial thing on the radio seems to be true. There seems to be a lot of truth to that, and that social commentary really bothered me. In so many ways, it feels like we are headed to the place that this movie gets us to by 2029, and it has nothing to do with mutants. We kind of use the mutant allegory in a really new way here, where we take something out of the natural human course of evolution, and we start dumbing people down even more than we had before. Real quick, I want to know what some of you guys' theaters were like, because Eric and I talked about this a little bit on How We Felt About the other day. We were really bothered by the reaction of our theater, and I went today and there was a little bit more of it too. People didn't know what kind of movie they were watching.
They were waiting to laugh.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they were laughing at things that weren't funny because they thought it was going to be a joke.
And importantly, I think the Deadpool thing at the beginning primed them for that.
Yeah.
I loved that, but I kind of wish it wasn't in front of this movie, because that puts you in really the wrong headspace to watch a film, as Eric keeps saying, that is this somber. Did you guys have a similar experience, or did you guys watch this film with mostly thoughtful people that got some of the subtext and knew what they were looking at? Go ahead, Rascal.
So I saw this movie, and I saw it like really early on in the day. It was like the first showing. It was like 11 o'clock. And there was a bunch of older people in there. And then there were a bunch of other people like behind me, and I didn't really get to see their ages. The people behind me, like, it seems like this happened with you guys as well. Like, they were laughing at things that I don't think were supposed to be funny and that were kind of sad. Like, maybe this was supposed to be funny. I didn't think it was supposed to be funny when after they bury Professor X, Logan is like beating the car. I didn't think that was supposed to be funny. Maybe I'm crazy, but people were laughing.
I thought I laughed at it. I mean, yeah. I think it was more of a nervous laugh because like up until like we had a lot of tension building for the last like 15, 20 minutes in the movie. And it's sort of this moment where you're kind of seeing things through Laura's eyes, and it was like a release of tension. Certainly people weren't like losing their crap over it, but you know, like
I think it's funny because of how long it goes.
Yeah, and that was it too. Like people didn't start laughing as soon as it started. It was like after the mirror was off and he was like still continuing, there was like kind of this chuckle, like nervous chuckle that erupted through the theater, and then like it kept going and people kind of simmered back down again. It didn't bother me in my theater, and I laughed too because it was this sort of like breaking the tension.
There were bits like that where you almost, it's almost up to opinion whether or not it's funny. I like that you said nervous laughter, Lo, because I had a lot of that. But there was this lady in our theater, and she wasn't the only one, but she was the loudest, who just kept like hearty belly laughs at things that were not funny and not remotely seemed to be supposed to be amusing. I'm sorry, go ahead, Rascal.
What are some of those things? Because like, what are some of the things that you guys thought, or that people were laughing at in your theater that you guys didn't think were supposed to be funny?
See, it's hard to think of specific examples because they were random.
There's one specific one. I'm trying to remember what Wolverine says, but he just has a line where he states something and then she laughed.
I don't want to spend this whole time talking.
And I don't know, and I don't remember what it was, but he was just like, she was like, "Ha!"
Yeah, it seemed like people thought they were going to see a comedy, or more to the point, a regular throwaway popcorn action movie. And I think are being really educated with this movie, because this is one of the best examples now, I think, of going for the source material or for the action or for an actor and leaving having had an emotional experience. You know, you go for Hugh Jackman and you stay for a real story.
Well, and I think it's called comic relief, and I think people didn't come in prepared for the movie it was, and so when you got the moments of levity,
they seemed even funnier because
and there's lines.
It's a relentless film.
There's lines that are like kind of chuckle lines, but like our theater really laughed because that was the only time they had an opportunity to actually laugh at things.
I think they were, and I think they were nervous. I think some people like as low as they were nervous. This is not what they thought they were going to
One
see.
of the big ones was when Wolverine's yelling Professor X, he goes, "You had a seizure at them." Kind of like a slightly funny line, but like our theater laughed like it was like a setup payoff big joke.
Yeah.
I do think the people in the theater were uncomfortable and didn't know what they were watching. And they came out talking about like it was an awesome action.
And again, that Deadpool thing does not prepare you for that. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, I think people had sort of the reaction that people talk about what they had to Ang Lee's Hulk when it came out, but in a good way. Like, I think people went to go see a movie more similar to the last Wolverine movie that James Mangold made, where it's like that movie has some character stuff going on, but it's very much like an action-driven, more solid kind of action movie kind of thing. This movie wasn't like that at all, and I think I don't know. I think it may have been the kind of nervousness thing Lo was talking about, because they expected the tone to change after the initial premise was set up or something, and it just stayed consistent the entire time. Like, I've seen some of these Marvel movies, where they have a really somber kind of premise, and then we get into the jokey slam bang action pretty fast, and that stays consistent throughout the whole movie. I don't think people expected to see a movie where Wolverine just kind of dies at the end, and the really plot of the characters we've been focusing on isn't resolved in any way but a thematic and character way. Like there's no finality to what X-23 story moving forward in the future is or anything like that. But I think the way people's expectations were defied in my theater seemed like a positive one. Like, everyone was silent through most of the movie, and when they came out, they were talking about a lot of that stuff. Not necessarily like the way we do, but they said like, "Oh, that was like a really great story," kind of thing. That was most of the discussion I heard walking out. But
I guess I just had like a weird crowd or something, because both times I saw it, no one laughed, like, ever. I honestly don't remember a single moment in that movie where like anyone had a laugh that was outside of just like a brief chuckle acknowledging that the line might be funny in some context. And it was a packed house too. It was a Friday show. It was completely sold out. And no one laughed. And when the movie was over, everyone just kind of sat there for like at least 5 minutes before people started getting up and walking away. And we're not even talking about like teenagers and stuff that expect post-credit scenes. Like, these are older people that just sat there and were kind of in awe. And then the second time I saw it, there was some more laughter, but even then, like, it seemed to hit home. In the second showing, there was someone that brought like a cadre of children with them into the theater to watch the movie, and even the kids, like, they kind of got it. Walking out of it, there was like talk about whether or not Hugh Jackman would come back as Wolverine, but like, no one talked about the movie as like how cool the action scenes were or anything. Kind of like Mad Max Fury Road, where like, there's deeper stuff there, but you can have an audience that just goes into it for the action. In my theater, no one did that. Like, everyone was kind of like, I don't want to say depressed, but they clearly were not, they didn't have fun the way you'd expect of an X-Men movie. So I think they got it.
Yeah, can I just mention...
It's not a fun film. It's got its really entertaining moments, but if you're not feeling really introspective by the end of the movie, you didn't see the same movie I did. Go ahead, let's go.
I was going to say, I brought up Mad Max earlier. I'm not saying these movies that are at all similar or the same kind of thing. I'm just talking, like, when I was mentioning my thing, I don't want people to think that I think that this movie is like a fun action movie like Mad Max. That's not what my point was. I just wanted to make that point.
And I think there were some expectations that it would be more like Mad Max, at least tonally, and that it would be more of a road trip movie.
I was kind of expecting that.
And the landscape.
That's what the comic is.
in the comic is that, yeah, the landscape would look more like that because we're in the Wild West. I was really impressed that we have a functioning society that still feels like the Wild West when mutants are involved.
Mhm.
That's one of the things that makes it feel a little scarier, I think, if you put your feet in the shoes of mutants in this time period where the world doesn't look like it does to human beings. When you're that super tiny minority, and it seems like very a very like shot on sight kind of situation. It is like the Wild West, and like it's almost a post-apocalyptic.
Yeah, and like I think a lot of people stayed through the credits because that Johnny Cash song they play at the end is so good. Like you got to stay and listen to that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I never heard anything about post-credit scene. I love that there isn't one.
Mm-hmm.
More like a piece. It's just a movie. It's not part of a larger franchise. We're just making a movie.
See, and
that's what I really hope we take from
like,
this.
that teaser does not need to be there. That movie's not even in production yet. Why does that have to be in front of this of all movies?
Yeah, and I think the great thing about this movie standing on its own is that like it's the best kind of sequel in that it's very accessible for people who haven't seen like the other Wolverine movies or even the other X-Men movies, but if you have, it really enhances the experience. Like, I think there's enough of a sense of what the relationship between Charles and Logan is like in this movie to kind of understand what they're doing with it. But if you've seen like going all the way back to X-Men 1, like this is a moving kind of performance thing for both of those characters in those actors. It's wonderful.
I also think it helps your brain not to explode if you actually don't know anything about the X-Men movies.
And I think this movie works perfectly as a standalone film, more so than maybe any other X-Men film. I think you can watch this completely in isolation without even really being aware of superhero movies and comic book movies like this. The mutant thing is the only thing where, like, if you came in not knowing anything, you'd be like, so wait, there's people with superpowers, but they're not here. That I think it works completely as a standalone film.
Does a good enough job of giving you that, and X-Men is so in the lexicon and the purview, at least in our country, that I feel like people would at least have the base knowledge of, okay, nobody's going to go to this movie and not know that Logan is a mutant named Wolverine, you know? So like they're going to have, and that Xavier ran a school. I think those two things you can maybe assume the majority of people are going to have. Yeah, it's exactly like Dark Knight. You don't need to see Batman Begins to see Dark Knight. You don't need to see any other X-Men movie to appreciate this film. Can we talk about continuity a little bit? And I don't want to get stuck on this for too long, but there's a point I made in how we felt about that I'm wrong about the more I'm looking at this movie, because I went and saw it again today, and I started looking at the timeline, such as it is, and a very specific piece of information that we're given where I went, oh, wait a minute. Not only can this not be in the soft rebooted continuity, I don't think it can be in any version of this continuity. Let's talk about this for a second. So when Professor X mentions the Statue of Liberty, and I think he's just delusional in that moment because he's like, everyone's waiting for us at the statue, and I think he's just put himself back in that time for a minute, is the best way I can read that scene. But he's talking about, you know, how they took Wolverine in and everything. It feels like we're at least in the original X-Men 1 to year 2000 moving forward continuity. And at first I thought it's possible that we're either in that and we've forgotten about Days of Future Past, but then ultimately that's not possible because in the original timeline with Days of Future Past, the Sentinels attack didn't seem to have happened.
Right.
So we can't have just forgotten about that. The only way it works is if it's in the soft reboot, but we've forgotten about the ending of Days of Future Past because of course, things seem to be okay in 2023 at least as far as mutants are concerned, and B, new ones because he's still running a school.
Well, no, because if continue at the end of Days of Future Past, Professor X would have had a seizure as he started to explain history to Logan.
And that wouldn't happen because that hasn't happened that long ago. And that was in 2023, like 5 years before this movie. But New Mutants born in 25 years. X4. What continuity is this so about it through X3? Like, if that's already happened, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that honestly, every time I've watched one of these movies and I try to think about the timeline, it makes my head hurt. So I just watch all of them, like all the X-Men movies, as like their own thing because they always contradict each other. Like even when you're looking, so it's kind of hard to really try and pick a place that this would fit in the timeline because I don't think it does at all either. Like I'm agreeing with you basically.
Yeah, I only feel the need to bring it up because it's a thing people like to talk about, and I know some folks will want to say, somebody in the comments, why are we even talking about this? It doesn't matter. It's a good movie. No, I completely agree. It doesn't matter, but it matters enough to mangle that apparently, at least according to some of our viewers, and I don't know what the sources are, but I had people mention how we felt that made people to bring it up. Yeah.
Last time we were saying this isn't connected to any X-Men.
Yeah. So if that's true, and again, I don't know what the source is. So like, if you said that, I don't understand that. But if it's just standalone and I mean, really, it fits with X1 and X2, and that's all right, you know. So yeah. Anyway, but I just felt the need to bring that up. But can we all agree that Hugh Jackman, I mean, regardless of his saying that that this is the end and he's not going to play this character again, I really hope that's true. I don't want to see him in the role ever again after this, and not just because he dies at the end. It's just the perfect cap off to that character. He finally made the movie he wanted to make. I don't ever want to see him in the role again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't need to see him in the next X-Men that they make after Apocalypse, like in that timeline. He's good. Like, he even in like past incarnations or timelines or whatever, like we don't need to see him again before his death.
Yeah. I would be completely satisfied if Wolverine didn't show up in any of the X-Men movies ever again. Yeah. I feel like this is that definitive of a story with this character that, like, what else is there to say? You know, like what would the purpose of Wolverine being in that movie be other than to, you know, give another actor the opportunity to play it a little bit differently and get butts in the seats because Wolverine's back? I don't know, like I just don't see this being topped, and this is the perfect ending cap off for not just like this character, but I feel like this is one of the best like ending of a superhero's like life stories I've seen ever. So yeah,
well,
I'm with you guys.
Cap and I had a conversation the other day, and I think the other story that you could tell is you would go back and do Weapon X again, but do it right and do it like this. Do an R-rated Wolverine origin movie that's just Weapon X.
And just do Barry Windsor Smith.
Yeah, just the guy getting broken down to like a savage level and being made into a weapon. Like, I think you could do that, but beyond that, do we need to see Wolverine being mean to Cyclops again?
No, I don't.
And Dan, to what you were saying about Wolverine getting butts in seats, that's what I love about finally getting to this place. And this is a real surreal experience to me. That's not true anymore. You don't need Wolverine with that for X-Men movies anymore. We've proven that 3 times now. Well, twice now. But I don't think Wolverine was even the main draw for Days of Future Past necessarily. Right.
I'm just saying, like, if they retire him for a while and then like they would totally advertise it, like Wolverine's back, guys. You've got to come see this.
Oh, no, they would.
You know? But how many times has Wolverine had like a cameo in a movie, basically a glorified cameo, and they made a huge deal about it in the trailer where they have his claws come into view, like
in Apocalypse. Yeah, that's where they did that. Yeah,
I know, but that's like they are still doing it, even if they don't necessarily need to. Like that was basically the point of that section of the movie, in my opinion.
No, sure. That's absolutely right. But the point I'm making is they're stuck in the past and they think they still need that, and or at least they did at that point. And they don't. The point I was trying to make with all that is that Logan is not capitalizing more on the love for Wolverine as a character. It's Hugh Jackman's version. It's that guy. I love that title for a million reasons, but one of them is we don't love Wolverine anymore. We love this character. The man, and that's a big deal. I love that we finally got it to that place.
And the movie is very reverential to the kind of like comic booky version of Wolverine is in what I appreciated so much about it. It talked about Wolverine as an inspirational figure in a movie that's this tragic, and I find that juxtaposition to be very interesting. Like the whole thing with the X-Men comics existing in this universe, and like he inspired children, even though he's this guy that's a killer and stuff like that. And by the end, he does inspire the next generation of mutants. I loved all that stuff. It was really cool. I kind of half expected him to put the costume on or something at the end for Allura, but I'm kind of glad, given the tone of the movie that we have, that didn't happen, because I think it being such like an old school kind of Western movie, it would have maybe felt a little out of place. As cool as it would have been to see that, you know?
In this context, yeah, like the costume doesn't really work, and this is part of what you guys were saying, like you don't need Hugh Jackman again for this movie. I think. I'm not saying you don't never need Wolverine again, though. I feel like at this point you have to reboot, because there's things in Wolverine's mythology. Like people said they really want the costume. People say they really want Sabretooth and stuff. This version of Wolverine that Hugh Jackman's been playing for 17 years, he doesn't have a relationship with Sabretooth outside of Origins, and no one likes Origins. He doesn't wear a costume. He doesn't like costumes. You can make more Wolverine movies, but you can't do it in this continuity. You have to reboot.
Absolutely, and even with the soft reboot with Days of Future Past and the New Apocalypse, which is already contradicting itself, that we have, you can't do it because we had Hugh Jackman's Wolverine.
Yeah, it's the same Wolverine carrying out through that lineage. Like if you want to make more Wolverine, you actually have to distance yourself from everything that's been established from Patrick Stewart and Hugh Jackman's performances.
The thing we don't have with Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is the smaller, scrappy version, which I would love to finally see.
It's infected the comics. Like by 2002, Wolverine has stopped being a small guy, and he never went back. It just never again. He's a tall, good-looking guy. He's not a small, hairy guy anymore.
The only thing I can think of that did that relatively recently was like Whedon's run on Astonishing. But Wolverine's kind of a joke in that too. Like Whedon's all focused on like Cyclops and that story and stuff, and Wolverine's just kind of the comic relief, so it kind of fits there, I suppose.
We get inside Wolverine's head, and what he's thinking is, "I want beer."
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm with you. I think seeing the scrappy version of him would be cool, because like that's why he's called Wolverine, because like that's what the animal is. It's a really small, vicious thing that can kill things that are much larger than it. So yeah, I mean that might be cool, but like other than aesthetic reasons, I don't know that I need to see this character out like in the X-Men movies anytime soon, at the very least. You know?
No, yeah, definitely. In fact, this movie is now. I mean, besides how I felt about Apocalypse, this movie is the best argument now for completely, finally rebooting this continuity, I think.
Yeah, because Hugh Jackman's Wolverine is kind of the through line of all of this. And he's done. This feels like it could be an ending to all of this, and we could start over tomorrow.
Yeah, I kind of don't want to see any more in a soft reboot of this same continuity. Whether you look at this more like a what if kind of movie or not.
Well, and it's just thematically, it feels like a real cap off to everything that we've done since 2000.
Yeah. And can we all agree? Let's stop making X-Men movies and just put it on TV, because it should be a serialized, ongoing thing.
Yeah, just keep going with that.
One of the things that we haven't really talked about is X-23, and I'd like to touch on her because she's such a big part of the movie and one of the reasons why I liked it so much. But to your point about making an X-Men TV show, like if they ever like make that New Mutants whatever thing on TV or movies, like I would really want it to be this group of characters from this movie. I feel like that'd be really cool. Like the kids.
Yeah, I was thinking that too at the end. That's where the optimism comes from. That you have this group of children at the end that can they can go on and continue both Wolverine and Professor X's legacy. And I like that. I really like thematically that the hope is in the children. This really interesting way totally nails Professor X's philosophy, even as it makes him a really sad, tragic character.
Yeah. But yeah, like I really liked how much of a relationship mentor-wise that Xavier had with X-23 as well. Like when he dies, like it really affects her in a really visceral kind of way. And I really appreciated all of that stuff. I thought, I mean, everyone's talking about this, and I'm sure you guys touched on how I felt about, but the child actor in this is the best child actor I've ever seen in anything.
She's amazing.
Anything.
She is incredible. She is able to convey exactly what's going on in the character's head without saying anything. You could just look at her and know what her state of mind is, even if it's not like rage or any sort of like visceral, raw emotional state. Like, she is incredible. I loved the character in this movie. I've never really been a fan of X-23 just because I've never read a whole lot with her in it. But this movie, I'm sure the comic book version is different because the X-Men movies are always kind of loose and with the way they adapt things. But I'm interested in this character now in a way that I never.
She's really close to her initial appearance in X-Men Evolution in that first episode. She's just like all rage and that kind of thing.
I didn't know she was in that show.
Well, there's an episode later in that show.
Oh,
where
okay.
She comes
She's like
back,
Harley Quinn.
and Logan has the same sort of thing he has here, where like he's much older than her, so like she keeps complaining that he's slowing her down because his healing factor doesn't work the same way.
Oh, interesting.
It makes sense that it would work differently, except for.
And then the comic, she kind of starts in a similar place and grows. And there's some really interesting stuff that we do with her in X-Force and then into Uncanny X-Force.
In the comics, is she a? Because I don't really know a lot about that character. Is she a regular mutant?
No,
or
she's a
genetically
clone
engineered?
She is a
Okay.
clone Wolverine.
And is it part of the Weapon X program like it is with this?
I think it's Weapon Plus, but yeah.
Because I really like the bookend and go back to all of that and handle it more maturely than Origins did, of course. One of my favorite things about this is all the elements that have been handled poorly in previous movies that we finally get right in this, and it almost feels like it's bragging in the best way possible. It's like, remember that stupid adamantium bullet thing? We're gonna make you cry about it. And I was like, yes.
Does that actually work though? Like, just out of curiosity, like Wolverine's healing factor was there before he got adamantium. So the adamantium bullet allows the bullet to pierce his skull and hit his brain, but can't he heal from that? He's healed from that before.
In previous movies, yeah.
So like, how would that actually kill X-24?
Well, I think the idea is that instant brain death is still death.
But like, he's
Yeah.
healed from his brain being exploded before.
Movies, has he?
Well,
thought
they
he did. Like,
shot
he
him
gets
in
Well, like, okay, he gets
one
shot
of the solo Wolverine movies. They shot him in the brain, like
Well,
point blank.
and that one erased his memory. That is true. We have established continuity-wise, if you
Yeah.
shoot Wolverine in the brain, it erases his memories.
Mhm.
Yeah,
and
I
that
mean,
somehow
like,
rather
it's almost
Stryker
the
knew
same
it would
thing,
do
but like
that.
they both Stryker and X-23 shoot the Wolverine from a far enough distance where like one shot's really lucky and erases memory, one shot's really lucky and it kills him, and I just don't know if I buy that.
Well, and isn't because it's an adamantium bullet both times, right?
But I still cried. I'm sorry, what, Lo?
It was an adamantium bullet that time too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's not the same one.
He just kept it. I don't think bullets work that way.
Just put in the new shell.
Well, see, I wouldn't think so either, but and I can't remember what the line was, but this time watching it, there was something that made me think that it was actually that, where it was like, at one time it represented this, but now I'm thinking about shooting myself in the head with it, and I kind of thought that maybe it was the same bullet, but I'm also not sure if Origins still counts at all. But I want that to be the one thing from Origins that we count, just because it's so dumb. And even though Steve is right that it doesn't actually make sense, it was not dumb in this. And
I loved it. I thought it was really interesting, like thematically and poetically. But it's just the thought of like, I don't think bullets or Wolverine work that way. Like, especially if it's adamantium coated, like that would mean it's so hard that it breaks through his skull and probably comes out the other side. It wouldn't, like, the adamantium wouldn't explode into shards in his head and kill his brain. Like that. That's not how the bullets work.
But he is already being poisoned by the adamantium, and his healing factor is breaking down. So while it may not have 15
for
years
Logan,
ago,
not for
but not X-24.
Yeah,
and
the
that's
X-24 is the one that gets killed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's
can kill Wolverine, but I can kill Wolverine with a
He's a
gun in this
clone.
movie. Like,
Not
it's
as good.
X-24.
But he keeps coming back from stuff. I mean, X-24 is T-1000. You can't get rid of him.
If his head were like when he gets shot in the head, his like adamantium skull obviously like shatters a little bit. How if he were to heal back? Like this is just like a what if. Like if he did start to heal back, what would that look like? Because he has like a busted.
He'd have a
open
mostly metal
adamantium
skull, but a bone skull for the rest of it.
And that's
I
awesome.
guess, but like I'm sure there'd be like bent pieces of adamantium like this, and he'd have like horns of adamantium. It'd be hilarious.
Let's go ahead and move. We should get back to some X-23 talk, but Dan much earlier brought up the comic book thing, and I want to talk about that motif and how it's utilized.
And how it doesn't make any sense. When were those made? Because they look like they were made in the late 70s, early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
They don't look like comic books that came out 10 years ago. The X-Men weren't kicking around in the late 70s, early 80s.
Well, maybe they were, and this is a different timeline. We just don't know it. I mean, if you take this movie on its own, you forget all the other movies. I don't know that it doesn't work.
My best guess is that in this universe, the X-Men were like the Men in Black. We're like, okay, I'm not saying the Men in Black are a real organization.
No, they are.
But there are theories and rumors, especially in the 90s and the 80s, about these Men in Black that show up after Alien Comics. And then we made movies and comic books about the Men in Black. Maybe it's like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, and where everybody thinks
how did they get the legal rights to write comic books about Wolverine and Colossus and Professor X?
Yeah, that's true. And what was the social climate with mutants like at that point? Would that have even been sellable? Would it have been controversial? But regardless of all that,
I want a special feature on the DVD that's a documentary of the history of X-Men comics in the Logan world. Because I have a lot of questions.
Like under the hood?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that.
But no, I wanted to touch on something Dan I alluded to earlier with that, which is the idea that Wolverine sells himself short, that he's actually been this at least for X-23, and I'm sure some other people, this inspirational figure based on good things he's done, forgetting the bad, and that he doesn't see any merit in anything he's done, and he thinks he's kind of a walking time bomb, and everybody who he cares about dies. I really like that line where Patrick where Professor X says, do you not see anything good about what we're trying to accomplish? And he doesn't, because he sees himself almost like a Grim Reaper character. And I really like that her optimism or her hope comes from those comic books.
And his goal is
wanting him to turn into the guy she read about.
Well, and his goal at that point is just survival. Everything's screwed. Nothing's working. We're just gonna get out of here.
Yeah, but importantly, that's also an altruistic place he's coming from, because he wants to die. So who is he? So it's not survival for him. What is it? It's survival for everyone else, because he doesn't want Professor X's brain bomb to go off and kill everyone. It's more about that than it is anything.
That's true.
He is Adam West in 60s Batman, running around with a bomb, trying not to blow up ducks or nuns. I mean, that's what that is. It's great. And then at the end, he more or less is able to be that hero for and in experiences that family that he said that Professor X said he still had time for. Did you guys think any of the comic book elements in this were going too far, too cheesy for this material?
Like what?
Because I know Steve felt that way about X-24 for a minute. I'm sorry, what? Well,
do you have any examples? Because I can't think of anything that...
Well, I just mean that everybody's talking about this, like Steve keeps saying, a real film. And it's interesting to me that some of those comic book elements with powers and genetic engineering and even the comic book motif in other films, people would have seen as making it too heightened and unrealistic. But you're not hearing anybody say that with this material.
Yeah,
and I was just wondering if anybody. Go ahead, Dan.
I was just saying it's interesting to see. For me, it was interesting to see a movie that wanted to be a Western but had science fiction in it at the same time. I don't think I've ever seen a movie try to do something like that before. It was really interesting. But I specifically liked the X-24 idea in this movie. Not only because when I was watching the scene, it really defied my expectations in a good way, where I thought it was a dream sequence or something. I was like, oh, the way it was shot, it seemed kind of surreal. But I liked that X-24 is kind of what Wolverine perceives himself to be, just this weapon that it just gets pointed in a direction and kills things and doesn't have anything to offer other people in terms of like intimacy and relationships with other people. Like even as a relationship with Professor X, all he thinks he can do for him is just kind of keep him alive and protect him. And that's exactly what like the X-24 kind of character is. And then Wolverine by the end proves not only to X-23 but also to himself that he's more than that. I really like that thematic implication of what they were doing with the evil twin kind of thing. Even though like, you know, in a lesser movie, like you just throw the evil twin in there, it would seem kind of ludicrous, but I really liked what they were saying with it. It was cool.
Part of it is that also like, and like it's just the notion of X-24 that I resisted the first time, but like the second time around, you could have made the X-24 Logan fights like Baraka Pool versus Wolverine in Origins. It could have been like the one part of the movie where suddenly we're filming an action scene and not like an encounter for survival, and they didn't do that. The way Wolverine attacks him, the way X-23 attacks him, like there is legitimate menace to the way he's working. So the second time around, it didn't feel cheesy to me. I think the way he looks, like exactly like Hugh Jackman, but like the slick black hair and everything, that was a little bit distracting because it almost looked like Sabretooth from Liev Schreiber's version. And so like I kept looking at him thinking like there's no way you're really here, so like it took me out a little bit just from like the sake of the effect, but otherwise I thought he worked really well, and that's probably the most out there thing in the whole movie.
Yeah, I really like that when we get to that stuff, this movie never becomes cool. It never becomes concerned with that. The movie I keep comparing it to when I talk to people is No Country for Old Men. No Country for Old Men is a movie with action scenes that's not an action movie and they're not fun. That's kind of the vibe that this movie had, and I really like that. Even when we get the supervillain stuff, it's never like high octane exhilarating.
Yeah.
It's all really visceral. You're not supposed to be having fun with the fight scenes.
The first chase scene when they're in the limo with X-23 and they drive past the train, that's probably the most fun a chase scene is in this movie. But even then, like there's blood in the windows, X-23 stabbing people with her claws through the glass, like it's running away frantically before it's cool in any sense.
Yeah,
and we've
also,
like just had her getting impaled by like a torpedo gun and like blocking bullets from hitting Professor X and stuff like that. Like it puts you in a mindset that you aren't like, yeah, beat the train. You're like, oh my God, everyone's gonna die, and this is like not fun. This is intense but not fun.
It's like it's very anti-action movie. Like when he tries to drive through the fence and it just doesn't work, and then he starts backing up. Like that's like it's like you'd expect in a normal movie. Just we drove through the fence, but it doesn't work that way.
Yeah,
either they drove through the fence and it's awesome, or they hit the fence and it's funny, and they didn't do either of those.
Yeah, did you notice that most of the fun in this movie comes from the family human moments?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And that's some of what makes these characters feel so realistic and makes this film so believable, and what makes it really sad and disturbing even when the other shoe drops much of the time. When we're sitting in the dining room with that family and they're making each other laugh and I'm laughing, all of a sudden I found myself going, oh, wait a minute, we're in trouble because I'm enjoying myself and that can't be good. And then it wasn't. I had the same thing Dan did. When X-24 comes in and kills Xavier with his claws, I was like, this movie is too good for a dream sequence like this. It felt like one of those gimmicky dream sequences where then he'd wake up. Oh my God! There's no way this movie is doing that. So then, I keep saying this off camera, but then there's. When I finally realized what was going on, it was when we cut back to Hugh Jackman getting out of the truck and coming up to the house. And, oh, that's right. He's been wearing a white muscle shirt this whole time. And although on second viewing, I noticed he's wearing the black T-shirt X-24 is wearing, and he takes it off. So they were wearing the same outfit or something really close for a minute. And then he goes up against those guys at the water tower or whatever, and he takes that shirt off. But anyway, X-24 does look like Sabretooth. I think that's on purpose. I think this was an attempt at finally, at least a nod to the Sabretooth thing, and finally sort of giving him his own rivalry with a Sabretooth that you believe in, even though it's not really Sabretooth. But I think that's why the hair slicked back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that would have been awesome, because I liked Liev Schreiber in that movie. I think given a better script, he'd be a great Sabretooth. Yeah, I'm with you, Cap. I loved all the human moments in this movie, and I thought a lot of them were the more humorous parts of the movie that I was laughing at personally. Like, I love that the scene where Wolverine gets frustrated that X-23 hasn't spoken for the majority of the film up until that point. Because it's a great parallel with what Caliban is saying about Wolverine at the beginning of the movie, where he's like, you don't talk to me about anything. Like, I can't connect with you because you don't vocalize anything that any of the troubles you're having. Like, I want to help you, but Wolverine's such a man of action that he doesn't like talk to people. And he's frustrated with his daughter for being the same way as him at a certain point.
It's a great point. Yeah. Lack of communication, and he sees something in her that is him, and that frustrates him. I want to ask you guys about the mute that mute thing, and how you guys felt about when the film decides to let her start talking, and if you bought into that. I was jarred by it on first viewing, and second viewing, I totally bought that they had that kind of relationship where she was finally willing to start talking.
I didn't like that she double does it. I'm completely fine with her not talking to the moment she talks. Then she talks in Spanish, and it's like, oh, well, they still can't communicate. And then she talks in English. I don't need three
Honestly,
layers of
she's a 12 or 13-year-old brat, and like who has had like, not to like super go down or anything, but like she's had almost no nurturing. She has no like kind of actual social skills. Like I can totally see her just being like, I still don't trust this guy. Like, yeah, I haven't been talking, and no, I'm not going to talk in English and make this easy for him. Like, I'm just going to be kind of a bratty like preteen. And maybe that's just because my siblings are this age and I see a lot of like similarities. Obviously, my siblings aren't killing people, but I can see where that could possibly be from like her age plus just the crazy upbringing that she's had.
Yeah, like
it's not just her age too, though. It's also
almost like, because at that point when she starts talking, she has to be the one that takes him to the hospital and everything. I feel like by that point, like, she doesn't like who Logan is, especially after Xavier's died. So like she is making things more difficult for him. And then the Spanish and the English combo thing, I think works really well, partly because when you have a person do that, typically like one accent over the other is worse. And it wasn't the case here. Like, her Spanish was authentically Spanish, and her English is good English for someone that is speaking Spanish. And then on top of that, if she's being raised as a killing machine, I have no doubt that like they taught her more than one language.
Sure, and it seems like all the other kids have somewhat thick Hispanic accents, and they can speak. They were in New Mexico, or excuse me, they were in Mexico City. So of course, but I just wanted to say that also, remember that she loses it when she is in those shackles, and she cannot stand to not have control body because of course, the way she was raised, and so I think part of the layered communication issue, Eric, the more I'm thinking about it, is she hasn't been talking to him all this time because that gives her a degree of control, and then she feels like she has to, but she does it in Spanish so that she's not relinquishing all that control.
We're finally talking, but there's still no communication. Like, that doesn't give you anything. It's
but you're telling him something that he didn't know before.
She's still getting stuff across to him.
And again, it's not just communication, it's also she's letting him know something before. It's a matter of control.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from, Cap.
But I'm sorry, Lo, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No, I'm good.
Where else do we want to go with that character? Because there's a lot of stuff going on there.
How does everybody feel about, because I've always thought this was dumb and we kept it for the movie, the Foot Claw?
I like the explanation that Charles gives.
I
about
like it.
I don't know if I buy the explanation.
I don't know if I buy the explanation either. I mean, Xavier is totally just kind of guessing too. Like that could totally not be the reason why
like,
she has it. But I like it. I thought it looked
the
cool.
way she uses those foot claws,
Yeah.
I buy it perfectly. Like she doesn't pop those things out until she absolutely needs to, and her hands don't work, and I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I don't have an issue with it in this movie because I know that she has that in the comics, so I expected it. But I've always thought that was a dumb design choice, so I didn't know if anybody.
I don't know. I always thought it looked cool. I like the three claws in the hand is iconic, but like something about two claws and then a claw on the foot just seemed more practical to me.
Yeah, I really like it. I have her action figure, and you can like fold the claws, not for like this movie, but you can like fold her claws out from under her boots. It's really cool.
Honestly, I saw the movie twice, and both times I did not notice the foot claw. And then there's the explanation about the foot claw, and I'm like, oh, she was using her feet. I didn't see that somehow.
Should we talk a little bit about Charles? Because I was not expecting to like him as much as I did, particularly because I don't like this character in these movies.
Oh, well, I loved him and was surprised because it's really sad, and he's Patrick Stewart F-bombing. And he seems so far away at first from what he used to be, and still has that same ideology, if not worldview. But I also loved it, Steve.
Yeah, I was interested in that because, like, I never agree with anything Charles Xavier has said in any of these movies. I vehemently
think that
disagree
humans
with
evolved
his
from
worldview
single-cell
in Days of Future
organisms
Past.
into.
I don't think Charles in the X-Men movies is a good leader or completely ethical in a different way. So like seeing him here and kind of broken and then getting both dying for nothing and dying for something with the way Wolverine is working with X-23, I thought all that was fantastic. And this is one of the best performances Patrick Stewart's ever given.
Yeah, I really liked him in this movie too. I did like that Professor Xavier's kind of dark place that he's in the beginning of the movie is partly due to his mental illness, and partly because of what he did in the past. But I think it's partly also because he sees the rehabilitation he thought he was doing with Logan failing, and he feels like I think at least in this series of movies, Logan is the one character that Xavier needs to redeem above any of the other ones because he's the most damaged and broken of them. And if you can succeed with Wolverine in creating an optimistic, hopeful person out of them with the things that Xavier believes, you can do it to anyone. And I think after he gets Logan to a place where he's starting to appreciate Laura a little bit more and is embracing the idea of maybe wanting to have a family at some point, I think and the fact that he like has that intimate family relationship with those people ever so briefly before he dies, I think all of that stuff was really poignant and very well done. I can't say enough good things about Patrick Stewart in this movie. He's great. I don't know why he has hair, but that's like the one thing I was like.
Yeah, that was weird. Maybe it's his mental state. Maybe something about the
Well,
the
he
mental
usually
disease he
shaves
has.
it, and now he's old and nobody's shaving it for him.
Yeah, but Apocalypse made him go bald. I thought that was like
Different timeline.
Here's
and
my
that was
rule.
dumb,
Oh,
so
yeah,
I'm
that's
gonna
true.
go-
Here's my rule, okay? When something in a good X-Men movie contradicts something in a bad X-Men movie, it wins out, all right? That's my rule.
I love the idea of Professor X having a brain disease and it's like giving Black Bolt Tourette's. Like you take someone that has something really, really dangerous and then medically make it so that it becomes they can't even control it. It just is uncontrollably dangerous. I think that's a really interesting idea, and I like the kind of meditation on that of losing control of what makes you strong and how it affects other people, and because it's not like Professor X actually does anything. He can't control it. It is a mental condition, that doesn't make him not feel guilty about it.
Yeah, and you would, and it challenges his worldview. I mean, that's what I love about it, is that he ran a school teaching people how to control their powers, and just before he dies, he kills some of those students not being able to control his. That's rough, and he still manages to retain at least some of that optimism. It's also, Dan, I thought of this while you're talking about his death. I didn't think of this until just now, but he and Wolverine both die in not similar ways, but they have. Look at them, both get impaled, so I guess they die in similar. But both of them have a similar experience before they die, where Xavier says he experienced the most perfect night he's had in a long time, and that like vindicates his optimism. And Wolverine,
well, he shouldn't have said that, because he would have been fine if that night was bad.
But what I was going to say is, and then at the end, Wolverine has the same thing, and he has that optimism proven to him in a way. It's really easy, because I mean, Eric and I were so introspective and we're so depressed after seeing this movie that we couldn't record a commentary.
We went to a bar.
We went to a bar after we saw this movie, and so maybe Wolverine, maybe Logan had a bad influence on us, Aaron, because the first thing he wants to do when he feels that way is go to a bar, and that's what we did. So I don't know, that's good, but we couldn't record that night, and yet it's and so it's really easy to forget that there is an optimism about this film and about the ending, and it's not sappy, and it's not gushing, and it's still really heart-wrenching. The film is saying that it's hard possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it resonated with me so much that this was an X-Men movie about how difficult it is to have a family and have relationships with other people, but that it's ultimately worth it to go through that struggle. Like, the whole plot of the movie is about like a weird, like, crazy corporation, like, in its own strange way trying to raise children, and how they failed at it, and how Wolverine has to take up that task with this girl and raise her and make a good person out of her. And he's like the last person you'd want to be in that situation, but he has to do it anyway, and it's really difficult for him. I don't know, like, all that stuff resonated with me real hard. I liked all that stuff.
And then also with the family, like, I love the parallel of, like, specifically it's a black family, and they're being pushed over by, like, the people that own this land with the water. And so, like, there's the X-Men metaphor is taken more literally with that particular family, and then how Charles and X-23 and Logan interact with that family sort of makes that whole metaphor feel way more concrete than it ever has in any of these movies.
Had anything to do with ethnicity necessarily.
Maybe
I didn't
not,
from
but,
the.
I think on an interpretive level it works that way.
No, and I think you can interpret it that way, but not with the Water Baron people. I just assumed that was like, I don't want you on my land. Like, it was a corporation thing. It was.
We own this.
Yeah, it's I forget what company it is, but that company that goes around into people's fields so they grows, and they're like, well, we own that.
Oh, Monsanto.
Yeah, Monsanto. Yeah, I was getting major Monsanto vibes from the farm scenes.
Yeah.
It occurred to me until a second viewing why the wife made so.
Because they're corn farmers.
Yeah, and I just didn't think of it until a second. She's like, we have plenty. And I'm like, you guys don't seem like you're all that well. You're doing it all. I wouldn't think you had plenty of anything. Oh, yeah, that's right. There's all that corn back there. Forgot about that. Okay, guys, we are at over an hour, so what I want to do right now is let the audience ask us to talk about any other aspects of the movie that we have not got, or that each of you guys in the panel get to bring up any other, whether small or items that you're just chomping at the bit to talk about. And let's start with Steve, and then between you guys, I'll bring up something from the comments if anybody has things they want to make sure to on. Go ahead, Steve.
Well, the one thing I want to mention when we get into this is the score. The score is just genius because it's really subtle and the way they play it, it feels kind of like a modernized Western. And particularly when you look at like classic Westerns and how we were making like hundreds of those at a time. And so like Westerns and superhero movies have always had like an interesting paralleling relationship. So like using so like Western movies, even if they're like considered great masterpieces now, a lot of them had like more like mass audience appeal action scenes and stuff like that. So like using that particular genre element in this movie and then adding this much more subtle musical score to it, and the way the music never overbears on any dramatic scenes. This is a particularly problem in most TV shows, but like superhero movies have this all the time where like if I'm supposed to feel sad, the music will tell me 20 seconds beforehand that this is a sad scene. And this movie does not do that. Like the score itself comes up when it needs to and when it underlines a scene. And if you don't notice it, that's okay because the mood's already there.
And the tense scenes don't feel the need to go.
Yeah, they don't feel the need to do like that Inception style Hans Zimmer booming, and that's fantastic. Like the action scenes almost have no score whatsoever aside from like explosions and gunfire and stuff, and it's perfect.
Yeah, there is some dissonant horror war going on during the big X-24 fight on the or maybe it's right after it, I forget. But when all hell has broken loose and the father we find out is still alive and his again comes out of the truck and starts firing. There's a bit during that where Wolverine is lumbering and trying to keep on his feet, where I thought it went to kind of that to a big dissonant horror film place. But I thought it was effective there. That's the closest to what you're talking about, Steve, that it does. No, I think the score is brilliant, and I wanted to talk about that too. So, it's one of the things that really drives home that Western vibe. Certainly, and I noticed it more on the second viewing because I think a lot of it is kind of is real background and easy to miss, except for the piano stuff. Some really heart-wrenching piano stuff. Okay, let's answer some questions here before we jump over to Rasco. So Rasco will be thinking about what you want to talk about. I gave Steve no time, but I'm going to do you the favor of letting you think about it. So Random Thoughts says wants us to talk about Donald Pierce and his scientist boss, and that was one of Eric's favorite things in the film.
Yeah, I really like the bad guy. I felt like a Western bad guy, like with that, but like he felt like a real classic, traditional Western kind of a villain that I don't know if we do a lot anymore. And I don't know. I liked him. I thought, especially with the way he's designed, or not designed, he's a person. The way his hair is cut and the way he's wearing the sunglasses in the trailer, I was like, he's gonna be like Blackheart or something. Or like he's gonna be this punk kid that's gonna show up, and he has that a little bit, but in a more traditional, classical Western sense. I like him.
I was sad that he doesn't wear the glasses throughout the whole movie because I really like those glasses on him.
Yeah,
glasses.
I really liked him as well. He is going to be the lead in Shane Black's Predator film. I don't know if you guys knew that, but he's the lead in that.
Ooh.
So that guy, he's probably going to be a big name within the next few years, I think. But I liked him as well.
Well, the robot hand makes it hard for him to get a lot of roles, but the ones that he's right for, he's just gonna nail it.
Yeah.
Saying that he wasn't.
I love his speech at the beginning.
I do too. I think he kind of drops out of the film a little bit. I do like. Not that I'm totally forgetting he's there, and I don't think it's really a problem. But he didn't hit me the way he did you, just because he's got that great speech at the beginning, and then I'm not thinking about him through a lot of the rest of the movie. But somebody else mentioned that he's got good thematic ties to Logan. I'll have to noodle that, but I'm sure there's more going on there than I.
Well, he voluntarily has been experimented on. He talks about you're not the only one's been enhanced.
Yeah,
I got a robot hand.
Yeah, that's true. He's like Wolverine if he steered into the.
I also love that his fingers go backwards.
Yeah.
When he's getting his hands fixed, he does this thing when he's like testing his fingers and they flip backwards. Thing.
Yeah.
I would
Okay.
do that all the time if I had a robot hand.
When that happened, I thought for a split second that he had put it on backwards, and I was like, "That's a weird movie." But then it was okay.
That was actually going to be my thing that I was going to bring up. Could we just go ahead and get into that? I wanted to talk about like the robotic limbs because
you're next, buddy. Go ahead.
All right, so because I'm really interested about transhumanist technology, because if you do a little bit of research, people today are doing some pretty crazy things, like putting chips in their hands so that they can like turn on their cars and the lights in their house and all sorts of things. Like today, this exists. And I just think it was really cool. Again, this movie does like what's really kind of, it's almost like a brave decision to go with the near future sci-fi stuff, but not try to make like, it doesn't feel like they think the audience needs to have this be this very distinct, crazy future. But in particular, I really did like the transhumanist kind of angle there with all of the robotic hands and stuff like that, because that's stuff that we're realistically not that far away from. And I don't know.
It's so close that Warren Ellis felt comfortable in his recent James Bond story, giving people robot hands, and he's like, James Bond's 30 seconds in the future. It's not we're there. It's just not commonplace yet. By 2029, I'm surprised if we didn't have people with working robot hands just commonly.
I mean, prosthetic
We talk about this a lot,
technology
but
is
a lot of
already
science
really
fiction
close
films.
to that. Like, depending on how traumatic and what sort of like what you have left over after an amputation, you can have arms that work, like hands that work with fingers and stuff. Because if you have any sort of control over like your shoulder joint or your elbow joint, you can. There's like hands out there that will close and open and like do all that sort of stuff just based on your own movement of whatever kind of like muscle you have left in there. So we're like scarily close to this sort of technology.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how science fiction films either don't feel that out there or are hardly science fiction films anymore. This isn't about the robotic limbs, but we've got that trailer for Life playing before this maybe in a lot of things right now, and action film until halfway in when they find life on another planet. Where I was thinking about that. We're at the beginning of that, like it's 2017 and we're on the space station. I'm like, 30 years ago this is a science fiction film, but it's not right now. Oh, and then you found life on other planets, and now it's a science fiction film. But this is in a weird way, and I don't mean this as a criticism. This is a really safe 2029 in that everything that is futuristic in this movie, I expect to be there when we get there. I don't think there's anything that they predict that's too far forward. And even the robotic hand and stuff, and genetic engineering. But that's not a prediction. That's X-Men. We were already doing that. That's the science fiction that's already there. But I don't think anything is far-fetched. We know that the cars that drive themselves is a thing we already have, and that is coming commercially soon, and that's kind of scary. But and then again, some of the social commentary.
Advance, not at all.
Yeah,
they will have exactly the same phones that we have now, using exactly the same maps that we have.
Well, that's true. Maybe we'll actually be. We will probably be beyond this with certain technologies.
I don't know.
I imagine. But anyway, a lot of people asking us to talk about Caliban. We have barely brought him up. I appreciated him a lot more on a second viewing. What did you guys think of that character?
I liked him. I think he was a little underutilized, just because he felt like a pretty cool and interesting character that we didn't really get to know a lot of. I don't know. But I like the way that he was sort of able to leave his mark on helping them get away. Even if it was sort of, I don't know, it didn't really seem like he actually killed anybody with those grenades. He just kind of slowed them down by knocking them out of the truck and making it so they couldn't use that truck for whatever they were using it for. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen more of him, I think.
I like his Bandito stuff.
What?
I would have liked.
It's cool.
I just needed more about his background.
Yeah.
That's.
I was going to
that's
say
my,
the same thing, Kat.
that's my big thing, is that I need to know, A, why he was so willing to go against his own kind in being a tracker before and working for Alkali, and B, I need to know what changed and what made him so loyal to his people and to Wolverine and Professor X, because when he's not the best life, it's not a picnic when he's working for them, and then he's, yes, he's being tortured, and that totally sucks, but I'm not sure why he's as loyal to them as he is, and he is a character that could have turned potentially, and perhaps we would have bought it, although then he does seem really loyal to Professor X and Wolverine.
In Apocalypse, is he's the one who gives Psylocke her... He's the guy that runs the bar, right?
I don't remember. I've only seen that a couple times.
I think that's Caliban.
Oh, that's interesting.
He was in a different movie, just played by a different actor. I don't remember which one. Yeah, he was in Apocalypse.
Okay, I think he was in Apocalypse.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
well, that's kind of neat. They piggybacked off that.
And I think he looks exactly the same.
But once again, it makes you think about continuity,
but
and
with makeup and stuff. That's
as
easy
a
enough.
lot of people in the comments are saying, we shouldn't think about that too much. So yeah. I liked his the thematic thing with his being having to stay away from the light, and maybe that is probably the most on the nose metaphor in the film, but I liked it a lot better on a second viewing, and comparing him to Logan, the can someone change question, it wasn't a compelling question for him really, because he's not there long enough and I don't know enough about him. Also, the grenade thing was really convenient, and I couldn't believe that they would have them that close to him where he could reach them. Yeah. Lo, is there anything you would like to talk about that we have not brought up at all?
Nothing specifically. I mean, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I really enjoyed Xavier's levity, I guess, and I think part of that is just because he was sort of doped up the entire time, but just how calming he was with Laura, and I think part of it is just that that's his thing. He's a teacher. He's always wanted to help children and stuff. And I mean, we already kind of touched on this, but I don't know. I just thought it was an interesting and new-ish place to take his character, and I loved. This was probably the biggest laugh in the movie for me. And it wasn't even, I don't think, supposed to be that funny, so maybe I'm part of the problem. But when he was he said it in Spanish, so I don't remember exactly what he said, but he said something like, it's okay, it's just a choo-choo. It's like, she's not 3. He's like, esta una choo-choo. Train.
I do wonder about, when we're first introduced to him, he's crazier than he is for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
He's Pluto, man. He's gone.
I think that's because he was not on some of the meds, so he was
right. And then he does the mind quake thing, and we put the medicine in him. But then when he does the mind quake again, it's not like he mentally had broken down again.
I don't think that's what makes him do that, though. I think he's on some different medication that
well, they mentioned that he's dealing.
Sedatives and stuff. I would assume.
I think it was Pierce who said it, but he said that he had ALS and dementia. So the ALS can account
he was he was trying to guess what exactly it was that he had. Okay. He definitely he remembers way too much. I think the idea is supposed to be with all, and the idea is he has a mental condition, but we don't know what exactly it is, and I don't think it is either of those things. He doesn't remember what exactly happened in Westchester for a long time, and then suddenly he remembers it. I think that's just because he's so doped up on meds, but I might be wrong. I'm not sure. That is a little fuzzy, maybe.
It's just to Eric's point, though. It's just weird that we introduce him giving us a Taco Bell commercial, literally, and then he's got that fantastic scene where he's describing the first time he saw Shane. I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 more times he should have done that throughout the movie. Just maybe not even to that extreme, but somewhere along the line, mention what it's like dealing with Professor X when he gets like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
but it's his fault.
And also, he's probably a little bit crazier being like cooped up in that water tower thing, because I don't imagine that he ever really gets out of there. And I imagine like once you're out of there and you get to like interact with the world and people a little bit more, you probably kind of gain a little bit more of your sanity back.
Yeah, that's fair. I also loved the performances between like him and X-23, where like they had an entire relationship where they barely talked to each other. And, like the way she would hold his hand and stuff, it was great.
To the point where I see her by the end of the movie as almost a product of Professor X and Wolverine as parents.
Yep.
Okay, let's look for some more questions here. Sam asks, anyone afraid that this film will have the Dark Knight / cinematic universe effect where Hollywood tries to make lightning strikes twice without knowing what made it work the first time around? Well, we were afraid that would happen with Deadpool.
Yeah, and this is the good future that I never expected from Deadpool. What happened when Deadpool came out was everyone would go, okay, so we need to do R-rated comics. Substance doesn't matter; it just has to be funny. And this is the exact opposite of that. This is what I never thought we'd get, which is,
The best timeline.
we can just make movies. We can have R-rated movies that are, we can, people will still go see them. People will still see superhero movies even if they're rated R.
Yeah,
and they can still financially do well.
Yeah, and that people are responding to, I mean, if the studios recognize that this is what's going on, that people aren't responding to violence, which this is not gratuitous, arguably. They are responding to a real story and to ideas and things that resonated with them emotionally, thus 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. So perhaps, especially Fox, but perhaps other studios might look at this and notice things like that, and also, these things don't have to be $300 million. This is a relatively, for these kinds of things, minimalistic film. It is a $95 million movie. It costs about what Deadpool cost to make, I think, and it's busters, and it's going to be remembered as one of the best superhero films ever made, at least for a good long while. It seems the way folks are talking about it, and that's really exciting. And this really pushes envelopes. Eric and I saw a lot of headlines and things that were saying things that sounded maybe kind of hyperbolic, and things that you hear with a lot of superhero movies from critics, like transcends the superhero genre and the new Dark Knight. And after I saw it, I said, you guys can have all of those things. It's absolutely right. I don't know if you're saying them for the same reason I might say those things, but yep, you can have all those things.
I will say that I've already noticed a couple of ripple effects from this movie in the trailer world, because the new Pirates of the Caribbean trailer had a Johnny Cash song over it, and that was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life. And I like Pirates of the Caribbean. I mean, it's a silly popcorn movie, but like, I'm excited for the new one. But I was like, what? Why? This makes no sense with this franchise. And the only thing I can think that would have caused that is the Logan trailer.
Well, that, and we seem to use Johnny Cash a lot.
There was one for Josh Carter that
here.
wasn't Johnny Cash, but sounded exactly like a Johnny Cash song. I can't think of what it was.
It was right here, both in selling it in the trailer. Hurt is the obvious place to go and exactly the right thing to use. And then that
Man Comes Around.
Yeah, which is one of my favorite Johnny Cash songs.
Yeah, I really like that
song. Is really relevant thematically to what's going on in this movie. And I thought that was cool. I thought it was neat that we went to Johnny Cash, but we didn't do Hurt, and that would have just been so on the nose. And it would make sense after he dies, and with the weirdly happy ending, but not happy ending.
I think it's an optimistic, ambiguous ending.
Ambiguous for her, certainly. For
the future. When
she repeats that Shane speech and is talking about the violence as a brand, I really don't know what she turns into. And I'd love to hear Steve's thoughts on that, because I know Steve actually knows something about Shane. I need to watch that movie. I've never actually sat down and watched it.
We can watch together.
But I know, you and Steve have talked about this, so I'm sure he's got thoughts.
Yeah, when you were asking about another thing to pick, I was originally going to say Shane, but I went to music because I figured Eric was going to bring up Shane before we ended this. But no, Eric and I had a conversation about that. So the movie is in all levels a tragedy. And structurally, when you write tragedy, the one thing that remains consistent, regardless of what formula you're going for, whether it's Aristotelian, Hegelian, Shakespearean, whatever, is typically that tragedy begins with cause and effect chains that are clear and ends with uncertainty. The opening of almost all tragedies, you understand why you are where you are, but you don't understand where that's going to get you after the movie is over. And so that's definitely there in this movie when you get to X-23. And particularly with Shane, because Shane's one of those movies that I almost feel like turns into a different movie halfway through, where like it's got like a very clear, basic cliche Western structure, and then suddenly it starts becoming like this commentary on violence and like what Shane turns into by defending this town and why he can't stay and all of that. And I think all of that resonates with who Logan is by the end, but particularly because X-23 has an image of the world that's completely predicated on like comic books, and then she's enthralled by watching Shane with Professor X, and like so she understands that like to some degree her view of the world is filtered by something that isn't really there, and so like I feel like by the end of this she doesn't turn into Wolverine, but she doesn't know how to answer the questions of like what the violence turns her into, because she hasn't really had to experience that yet. From beginning to end of her life so far, she's only been fighting things. And ideally, when she crosses the border, she's going to have time for peace to reflect on these things. But like that's where the uncertainty comes in. We're like, I don't know if like X-23 has ever had a moment of legitimate consequence for her violence. And so like part of the reason her calling Logan dad at the end when he dies resonated with me is because I think at that point she understood Logan got closure that she isn't going to have yet, that her story isn't even close to finish the way his is. And like in some ways she's looking for that finite, almost movie comic book ending, and she's not going to have that just because this movie's over.
And she's been told by Professor X that she can be better than him, but she doesn't have that guidance anymore. Yeah. So what is that going to be like? I also want to
do a sequel where Professor X put his mind in her mind.
Yeah, and then it turns out that she is both X-23 and Onslaught. Yeah. So I also wanted to with the Shane thing and the speech at the end. I don't know if I'm right about this. I think there might be, if I'm not reading too far into it, potentially some meta commentary about where we are with film right now. I'm having a really hard time not getting away from the ideas of desensitization in this movie. And when she says violence is a brand and it sticks and you can't get away from it, this is one of the most violent films I've seen in a really long time, and it all feels necessary. And when I hear that, I can't decide if the film isn't almost saying it's bothered by the fact that it's necessary and that people can even handle it. And it's almost like the movie is being presented to people that it knows are maybe on our way. This is so depressing. On our way to the like mindless zombie lemmings that we talk about in this film, and that it almost like knows that it's part of the problem, but it's not, because there are consequences and it's about something. But it's like not okay with how violent it has to be to make the point it's making. I don't know if I'm onto anything with that, but
when you say that, like, it's particularly depressing. Like when you see the scene where Donald Pierce gets knocked down and all of the children sadistically murder him. Like, I understand why they did it, but like the fact that they got to the point where they became like that is kind of terrifying. And then like there's all this talk from the scientists and stuff of like, we can't have people that are patents running around. The fact that like products and such are responsible for the end of mutants, that Logan has basically just become part of a system driving people around that he doesn't understand or like, just to make money. Like everything sort of becomes about like brands and whether or not you want people to recognize you and how you want them to recognize you. And then literally with Wolverine, like the images you cast because of what people expect you to be and what you're not going to be. I don't know if any of that is even halfway intentional, but it's interesting to think about that, particularly as like a these are children, they are the future. Kids watch movies, kids read comic books. What becomes of them in a climate that is so predicated on filtering them to be certain ways, like that Foucauldian notion of like people become subjects in the world. It is the way the world operates that makes people who they are. So like these kids escape by the end, but they're not free in any way. Like their lives, no matter what, is constantly going to be haunted by the things that the world forced them to be to get free in the first place.
And not to mention that mutants are the group that are, most bigoted against at this point.
There's a line that Wolverine has when he's mouthing off about the comic books. I can't remember what the line is exactly, but it feels like it's a criticism of current superhero comic book movies. Like he talks about how they're just corporate properties that people are just churning out.
Yeah, but it was more about like sensationalism of real life events. I wasn't sure if we were talking at all about the actual industry there. I was on the fence about it.
I don't know, but Wolverine's got some kind of issue with branding and marketing, whether it's real life events or it's source material and stuff.
Some of our viewers in the comments in the How We Felt About even suggested, and I don't think I agree with this, but even suggested that perhaps that was like he's saying like a quarter of it happened, and of course that was in the trailer too, but not at all like this. That's kind of a tongue-in-cheek way to say that. Like the movies we saw didn't really happen the way we saw them, and that this is the only reality that actually really counts. The problem with that is that it was all on film and that it wasn't actually in comic books, and so I have a difficult time with that. But it's kind of a fun notion.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reads on what that was saying, if anything. But this is one of those movies that it's just so thoughtful that it takes on a life of its own, and there are all kinds of things that probably were never intended that you're likely to pick up on. One thing I want to talk about that people are asking us to mention, specifically Barry Allen, but a lot of other people asking if this movie will be out for Oscars and if it's Oscar worthy. No and yes.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It will not get a single Oscar nod, but it should.
Hugh Jackman gives an Oscar-worthy performance in this. I think he deserves at least a nomination.
I think Patrick Stewart gives an Oscar-worthy for supporting.
Yep.
And the girl that plays X-23 also gives an Oscar-worthy performance.
Okay, besides the time of the release of this movie, why do you say that it won't get any nods?
Because Oscars snub genre all the time and
genre.
constantly.
But I mean, it's not unprecedented. Like Heath Ledger won an Oscar.
Nope.
He only won an Oscar because he died. If he hadn't died, he wouldn't even have been nominated.
Mad Max Fury Road got nominated and possibly won that year for
But it
some
wasn't a
technical
superhero
awards.
movie.
No, but here's the difference between Logan.
The year Birdman won, they spent the entire Oscars talking about how awful it is that superhero movies are constant and exist, and oh my God, you survived the onslaught of superhero. But the Oscars do not like superhero movies.
Yes, yeah, but what they do is they love to pander to narratives. So this is Hugh Jackman's last performance as Wolverine. Everyone's singing this movie's praises. So if they were to give a superhero movie or an actor from a superhero movie an Oscar, and it wasn't because of them dying, this would be the movie.
And
that's true.
Oscars also love to overcorrect, where like if people think they did something wrong the next year, they'll take it ridiculous degrees. Like into
That's a really good point. Like the ethnicity thing.
Suddenly there were 10 nominees the year after that. They had that whole thing about the people that got out and nominated for Oscars the previous year, and then this year it became all about making sure that the actor nominations, the movie nominations were diverse. So like, if any movie has any superhero movie's ever had a chance of winning or at least getting nominated for an Oscar, it's going to be this one.
Yeah, that's true.
But are we far enough away from Dark Knight for that to really, like they might get in trouble again?
Because Dark Knight should have gotten a Best Picture nod if Heath Ledger was going to end by that. That always really bothered me. But that's also been a decade ago now.
Yeah. If Dark Knight came out 3 years ago, I think absolutely this would get nominated.
Rasco makes a really compelling argument.
Yeah.
And so does Steve. So maybe we're wrong. Maybe there is potential.
We're not wrong.
It certainly should.
Especially because when it came out, they will completely forget about this movie by the time the Oscars roll around.
That's what I think is the biggest thing holding it. That's like what I think is the biggest obstacle, is just the time of release. But because there's so much buzz about this being his like send-off performance, that's the only reason why I think that you can't just say it's not comparable to say like Winter Soldier or something like that. That's a really good movie. It's not comparable because outside of that movie being good, there's no like pop culture like zeitgeist thing happening with it.
Yeah. And I mean, this movie does things that are like, not in a bad way, but like Oscar movie level pretentious. So like, this is a movie made for them. And plus, Mangold's the guy that did the 3:10 to Yuma remake. So like, he's already got some clout with those types of people that would nominate him.
Did 3:10 to Yuma get nominated?
I think it did, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
It was a massissive movie the year it came out. I'm not sure if it like won anything, but it was nominated.
I liked it quite a bit, but I didn't realize it was like an Oscar movie.
Yeah, it got. I remember watching the Oscars like that year. Like there was a lot of buzz about that movie leading up to it. Again, I don't think it won anything, but like the director walked in those circles for a while.
Can I suggest this? And I want to be wrong about that, and it would be wonderful to get nominated. And even if for the reasons Rasco's saying, well, if any superhero movie did, okay, what was the last superhero movie that you really thought would have been deserving of Best Picture? I mean, like this one. Definitely, it's been a long time. So I'm not going to begrudge them, even if it's for kind of the motivations he's suggesting. If that happens, and it's especially if it gets nominated also for Best Supporting.
Last year.
Nominated for Best Supporting or Best Actor or Best Actress. I think that will be one of the best watched Oscars in a long time.
Probably.
If Logan's gotten some nominations.
Yeah. I think suddenly, more of our crowd is gonna care about the Oscars. Dan, have you got to throw out your last final thoughts and things you want to talk about?
I have not, but my final thoughts is go see this movie. It's amazing. I can't heap enough praise on it. It's one of my favorite things, and I really like this movie. We talked a little bit about the violence in this movie, but I think the thing that I like the most about the violence in this movie is that I think it would have been very easy, now that we have the first time Wolverine's on screen with a rated R kind of thing, to just have him like rip open people and not talk at all about the consequence of the violence. But this is a movie that thematically deals with what the consequences of violence are on the people that are like doing the violent things in the movie. And the lesson that X-23 has to learn by the end of the movie is all about violence. I really liked that they were very mature about the way they used violence in the movie, and I appreciated that about it as well. It's really great.
Well, folks, we are at almost 2 hours already. It's nuts. So why don't we go ahead and close? Does anybody else have any last quick thing that you want to make sure gets said before we finish up?
I have one. I didn't get to do my thing.
You didn't get to do your thing?
No,
I'm sorry, Eric.
no,
And I didn't do one either, but that's okay.
I have a little thing that's about people in movies doing something dumb that goes back home.
The dawn of
westerns. So they do this thing where you go past the train, right? And they do it smarter than most movies. You don't just drive and make it past the train. You go up and around, so you know you're going to make it past the train. They do. They do the thing that they always do. They stop and look back and watch the bad guys staring at them. That's time you're wasting to get away. That's all I got.
Well, everybody, we want to thank you so much for watching our live spoiler cast on Logan. This is a real game changer. It's going to be really interesting to see. Just like with Deadpool last year, but of course it's it's a very different thing.
It is interesting that this is the second film in the X-Men film franchise that is in some ways raising the bar, and the X-Men films are not meeting the bars that are being set.
And is rated R, costs less to make than them, and we have no idea what timeline they're set in. Those are all things that those movies have in common.
That's the formula.
But just like I did with after Deadpool and BVS for different reasons, I felt like now I live in a world after this movie, and it's going to be interesting to see what kind of influence it has on things. And this is one I'm very excited to sit down eventually and dissect for a superhero rewind. So thanks a lot for all the comments and questions live, and thanks a lot, panelists. You guys are great as always, and it was really fun to get the majority of the gang back together. Miss Manos, but we have not had this big in a long time, and
Manos doesn't like Wolverine, so I don't know if he went to see this film.
Well, he doesn't like Wolverine.
He doesn't like Wolverine.
I didn't know that.
He doesn't like the X-Men in general.
But remember, he liked Origins initially. Yeah, he did a review of Origins, and makes fun of himself for liking that when it first came out.
We all did.
He says that's
okay.
He says that's his worst video.
Or we were all excited for it, I guess.
And he's thumbed up some posts I made online about that movie, so I think he's interested.
See it. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen it, but I think I haven't seen him in the comments. Sometimes he makes it when he'll just check in and write a comment if he doesn't make the show. But anyway, really cool to get so much of the gang back together for this, and almost a year after we did PBS last year all together. But anyway, let's go ahead and bid everyone farewell. Thanks again for watching, and we will see you again next Sunday night for Geeks Not Nerds live at 8 p.m. Eric has a really interesting topic for us next week, which we will reveal when we get to that. But we'll be talking about the superhero movie culture some more on that show. We've got more Marvel Mania coming for you this week. We've only got about 12 of those left to do, so less than 2 weeks, and we'll be finished with those, and lots more video coming your way. In the meantime, I am Captain Logan. This was Eric.
I was Eric.
And we had Jackson Rasco.
Sing!
The Curious Low.
Bye.
Spider Dan Torrey.
Bye, guys.
And Steve Baxey.
Good night, everybody.
Once again, I was Captain Logan saying good night. Good night.